Y'all ready to study the scriptures together this morning? Well, I am too. I've been looking forward to this, and in a way it's kind of been heavy. Several years ago I lost my mother from this physical earth, but she's never left me. I know that she's still praying for me. And how many of y'all had a praying mother? Well, I tell you what, a praying mama makes all the difference in the world. Makes all the difference in the world. And that's right. That's right. And granddaughters are pretty special too. The days before Israel had a king, it was really a pretty dark time. It's not bothering me if it's not bothering them. It was a dark time in the days before Israel had a king. They were under the rule of judges. They had a high priest. And for the first time, the person who was the high priest was also the one who was the judge. He was over all of their military work, and his name was Eli. And he was a priest, and he was also then a judge for 40 of his 98 years that he lived. And Eli and his sons were responsible for the worship and for the sacrifices that took place in Shiloh. And Shiloh was the location where the Moses' tabernacle that had the Ark of the Covenant had been set to rest for many, many, many years. And Eli and his sons were there and helping all the people when they would come for the sacrifices at their time of the year. The problem was the sons were wicked. And Eli was old. And things were pretty dark in the spiritual leadership of Israel. In fact, the scriptures say that the word of the Lord was rare in those days, meaning there was no widespread revelation. They weren't getting a new, fresh word from God. And is there any wonder why? They had the high priest running the military, and they also involved in all the secular leadership, and then they had sons who were supposed to be taking care of things. And I'm not going to go into all the wicked things they did, but trust me, 1 Samuel talks about their wickedness, and they were wicked, wicked men. But the people would still come, and God needed and God wanted to change things, and God used a woman. And her heart's cry, the anguish that was in her soul to create a change in Israel that really has changed the world. And it all began not with a petition. It didn't begin with an election. It began with a prayer. Just a woman's prayer. That's where it all began. Hannah was her name. She was one of two sons of a man named Elkanah. And she was one of two wives, and her husband really loved her the most. And still she felt disappointed, and she felt frustrated, and she felt discouraged because she had unfulfilled expectations. See, Hannah wanted a child, and for whatever reason she was barren. She had no child. And for her it was a great source of frustration. And the truth is that so many times when we fall into frustration and disappointment and unfilled expectations, that is the trench that we fall into in which we do most of our battle. Y'all agree with that? It's the frustrations of the things that we're expecting to happen in our life and they don't seem to be happening. And we get mired down in it and we just get stuck in it. She got out of it through prayer. In Hebrew, Hannah's name means grace or favor. But I kind of imagine she felt that was kind of a cruel joke from her parents because that's not how she saw herself at all. She didn't think of herself as one receiving grace, even though her husband said, you know, you are special. He gave her more of the share of food of the sacrifices. He treated her in the special way that he felt for her, but still there was something missing in her life. It was lacking, and she didn't feel like she had grace, and she didn't feel like she had favor, because the other wife had sons and daughters, and that other wife just loved to rub it in. And scriptures talk about not the day-to-day rubbing it in, it was when she really rubbed it in is when they would go to the tabernacle to worship and sacrifice. And this other wife would just, he said, would the scriptures say that she would provoke her severely to make her miserable. You have anybody in your life you feel like just wants to provoke you, to make you miserable? And it's not your mamas. Your mamas are trying to do good things for you. Mama's got to provoke you. Sometimes we got to provoke each other, but there's a completely different attitude when somebody's provoking you to correct you and somebody who's provoking you to make you miserable. But that's exactly where Hannah was. She was miserable. And the scriptures say that she was afflicted with this bitterness of soul. And she wept. In the times of worship, she was weeping. And she was in pain. And there are a lot of things that you can do when somebody tries to make you miserable and somebody tries to provoke you. Could you imagine coming to church and every time you walk in the door, somebody's just poking you and just criticizing you and saying, look at all my blessings. You don't got any, do you? You'd be tempted just to turn around and walk away. But one thing I love about Hannah is she put it off. Even though she was miserable, she said, I'm coming here to meet God. Amen. Because I know that's where my answers are. And that's exactly what she did this particular year. She came to the tabernacle to meet God. And in fact, while she was in there with the sacrifices at the tabernacle over by the doors, Eli was there, and she came and she made a vow to God. And that vow is like a promise. And this was a vow that she made in a prayer. And she said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. That would be the vow of the Nazarite, the one who's dedicated to God. And as she continued praying and she's pouring out her soul before the Lord, she's doing this silently. She's moving her mouth, but she's not speaking out loud. And in fact, she seems so strange. Eli, the high priest, thought she must be drunk. And he starts griping at her and chewing her out. What are you doing? Quit coming here getting drunk, lady. That's kind of the essence of what he was saying. He says, don't come up here drunk. And she says, I'm not drunk. I'm praying to God. And Eli blessed her and said, may the Lord give you what you've asked for. And so she came with this prayer, with this vow, and she goes back home. And God remembered her and she had a son. Complete answer to prayer. She's been asking for so many times, but now she's made this vow before God. God, would just give me a son and I'm going to give him right back to you. She named him Samuel, which means in the Hebrew translation, asked of God, heard by God. She knew exactly where the child came from, because that's exactly what she asked from God. It's strange that the vows, the vow in the Old Testament, there were certain rules, and if you were a woman and you made a vow to God and nobody heard you, you weren't bound by it. If your husband's really, what happens if you made a vow and your husband said, no, you're not doing that, then it kind of nullified the vow. But if your husband heard it, then you had to keep it. And if you were a widow, or if you were unmarried or even a divorced woman, and you made a vow before God, you were obligated to keep that vow. And so this is exactly the context in which she is praying and she's asking God to perform this miracle in her life. And when the child was old enough and didn't need to be weaned or to need to be nursed anymore, in fact was weaned, she brought the child and her. Before that, Really, her husband's saying, okay, you don't have to bring her up yet, but we're going to fulfill the vow that you gave. And we're going to lend him to the Lord as long as he lives. And when she got him and she brought him, even before I guess when she did bring him, she brought the sacrifice. And Hannah gives a prayer that really turned into a prophecy over this child. I think it's worth reading. There's only 3 or 4 prayers of women that are even recorded in the Bible, which is so strange to me because you know who seems to pray the most? It's women. Isn't that the truth? And so I think it's worth reading this prayer together. And we're going to have it up on the screen here because this is a mother's prayer. It's a mother's prayer of this child that she had asked for, that God had granted her petition. He said, and you got there in 1 Samuel chapter 2, he said, and Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn, that would be her strength, is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies. I wonder who that was. I smile at my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. Isn't that beautiful? Boy, is she in anguish of spirit at this time? Is she depressed and down? No. She's been praying and God delivered. She said, and no one is holy like the Lord, for there is none beside you. She's given credit where credit's due. Nor is there any rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth, for the Lord is the knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. You know, it's amazing when you can get out of getting in the tussle with the people who are provoking and you just turn it to God. And when God starts giving the answers, you don't go back to saying, see, I told you so. You just go back to God and say, God, you're the one who's doing it. Verse 4, the bows of the mighty men are broken, and those who stumbled are girded with strength. Those who have hired themselves out for bread, and the hungry have ceased to hunger. Even the barren has borne 7, and who has had many children has become feeble. The Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and brings up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and he lifts up. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the beggar from the ash heap, to set them among princes and to make them inherit the throne of glory. Does Hannah know who's in charge here? For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them. He will guard the feet of his saints, but the wicked shall be silent in darkness, for by strength no man shall prevail. We're not going to do it on our own. We're not going to do it in our strength. We're only going to get success. These things are only going to happen to us when we do what Hannah did, is come to God and pray and give it all to him. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken in pieces. From heaven he will thunder against them. And this is really a prophetic statement that she makes, that is going to be the hallmark of her sons' lives. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Scriptures say then she went home and Samuel stayed. We don't know how old he was. Some commentators that I've read said he was as old as 12, and some say he was as young as 4 and 5. I don't know. Scripture just says he was young. I guess he was still growing, because Hannah would come every year back to the tabernacle where she left Samuel with Eli to minister before the Lord, and she'd bring him a new robe every year, so we know he's still growing. It used to bother me when I was a kid. I'm going to be honest with you, when I read this story as a young son, it bothered me that Mama would drop them off at the church house and say, I'll see you next year. Then he'd come again next year. I thought, what kind of mother would do that? Any of y'all want to do that? Just drop off your child and come back every year and give them a new set of clothes? But I'm going to tell you, God blessed what she did. It was only 15 miles away from where they lived. Wasn't that far. But she left him there. Not because she wanted to dump him at the fire station or to get rid of him, because she wanted more children. In fact, God gave her more children, gave her 3 more sons and 2 more daughters in the years to follow. But she left her son Samuel there because she heard God's heart cry. God's heart cry was he wanted to see children and people serving him in his kingdom, and the womb was barren. He had Eli as a high priest and the wicked sons as their children. And I'm going to tell you what, the spiritual condition of the land was dark. And God's cry was, I want children. And he placed that same cry and that same heart into Hannah, who said, God, I want children. He says, well, I'm going to give you one. And it was this Samuel who became a prophet known to the entire nation of Israel. Not only to the entire nation of Israel, but to the entire world, as recorded in our Bible. This child that she left there at the tabernacle, that she would bring and she entrusted to her Lord, that she entrusted to God and said, I'm lending this child to you. This is the one who became prophet for the whole nation. I'm going to tell you, it all started with a prayer. It was this Samuel that God used to anoint the new king Saul, and used to anoint the king who had a heart after God's own heart. His name was David. And it all started with a what? With a prayer. It all started with a prayer. I'll tell you folks, women, I'm speaking to you women right now, you are significant. I don't care what anybody says to you. I don't care how anybody tries to put you down. You are significant. And men, it is to our benefit to give them the honor of that significance. I really expect some amens with that one. At least from the guys, if not from the ladies. I mean, this is important stuff. I mean, this is really important. If we want the world to change, I'm going to tell you, it starts with prayers. And almost always those prayers start with women because they are sensitive to the heart cry of God. I'm going to tell you, I appreciate so much about my wife. She gives me insight and tells me things months before I think of it myself. It's just say, we ought to do this. Have you thought about that? And I put it on the shelf, and about a month or two later, I think, that was really a good idea. Because women are much more intuitive. Y'all agree with that? Yeah. It just tuned in. And guys, it's time for us to listen to our women.
Thank you.
It is. It's important. It is important. Because God so many times speaks through women. I know God spoke to me through my mother all the time. I didn't always want to hear it, but my mama was listening. And I'm glad she prayed for me. I know women who feel frustrated and you think, look at what I'm doing. It's not that significant. I'm taking care of a baby. I'm taking care of a child. I'm feeding and clothing and doing the laundry and doing the dishes and working a job. And I'm trying to take care of my husband who's just always, I'm not going to say anything bad about the husbands, but you're taking care of people. And so many times I've heard other women say, I just don't feel like God's using me. I'm going to tell you, what you do changes the world. What you do changes the world, just like Hannah. She asked for a child. God gave her a child. She gave the child back to God, and it changed the world. I can't think of anything more significant. Mamas, don't stop praying. Mamas, don't stop praying for your children. Yeah, they're knotheads and they go off and do things they shouldn't do, and they make it hard to love sometimes, but don't quit praying for your children. Sometimes it's tough love, but don't stop praying for your children. Grandmamas, and I don't care how old a mama you are, Joe, isn't that right? She's praying. She's praying, and those prayers make a difference. And we see it, and we're blessed by it. Because we know we've got mamas in here who are praying for their children. We've got grandmamas. Grandmamas, don't quit praying for your children. And even if you're distant, even if you're far away, more than 15 miles, if you're on the other side of the country, keep praying for your children. Because God hears your prayers. God hears your prayers. Pray for your children. Pray for your grandchildren. There are people who haven't had children. And I'm going to tell you, you can be a spiritual mother. This is not just for people who have physical children. I'm going to tell you what, if you are a believer and you are a woman, you can have spiritual children. Don't quit praying for your children. Please. I had a friend who told me about a dream one time that he had, and God revealed, this has not happened to me many times in my life, but God revealed to me what that dream was about. And in the dream, his mother was riding him on like a horse on the back. No, I take it was just the opposite. He was riding her. And he couldn't understand, why is she carrying me around? And God just gave me a clear revelation right then. I said, has she been praying for you? He says, she prays for me every day. He said, she's been carrying you on her back for years. He just broke down crying. He says, that's true. My mama's been carrying me on her back for years. Sometimes that's what you do as a parent. Naturally, you want to grab them and you want to control them and you want to put them you want to put them underneath your wings, but sometimes the best thing you can do is just say, God, I'm giving them to you. God, I'm giving them to you. You think God's going to take less care of your child than you can? He does. What blessings do we withhold because we don't give our children and our grandchildren and our husbands and our wives to God? I see here with Hannah, Hannah received, because she honored the vow that she gave, she had a bunch more children. She got her prayer recorded in the Bible. That's pretty cool. She became her name. Grace and favor. Because she gave God something that to me seems incomprehensible. To have a child and give them to God. How many times have we accidentally stepped on the dreams of our children or our grandchildren who wanted to go serve God, and we said, no, you need to go get a job. You need to go do this. You need to wait. You don't need to do that kind of thing. That's a little dangerous. Are y'all following me? How many times that we tell our children and pull them back instead of just saying, God, I give them to you. I entrust them to you. Use them. Use them to change the world. I'm going to tell you, if we do that, God's going to bless you as a parent, as a mother, as a grandchild, and saying, God, I want to love this child. I want to give this child everything that I can possibly give, but I'm going to give them to you. And God's going to do great things with them. It doesn't happen overnight. It may take years. It may take many years. It may take their entire lifetime. But I trust God that He's going to use and answer the prayers of mothers just like you, and of grandparents just like you. Don't y'all want somebody praying for you like that? Oh, I do. This is going to be a little bit different closing. Dallas, will you come up? This is what I'd like for us to do, is I would like for the mamas just to pray today. I'd like you mamas just to stand up and stretch your hand out to people in this auditorium, because your prayers make the difference. And if you feel comfortable, go up to somebody and pray for them. I'd like for us just to spend some time releasing what I believe God has inside of every mother, whether you're a physical mother or a spiritual mother. If you don't feel comfortable, I don't want to make you do anything that you feel uncomfortable for, but that's what I want us to do today. I want us to use the prayers of mothers to change our world. I need prayers. My mama's not here anymore. There's a lot of you whose mothers have passed and have gone. It's hard, isn't it? I'm going to tell you what. You mothers, we need you. This church needs you. And the kingdom of God needs you. Do y'all mind doing that just for a few minutes? Mamas, y'all stand. And we're going to let Dallas play here softly, and I'm going to just let the mamas do the praying today. And the men, we're going to sit down, and we're going to let the mamas pray. Because I believe with all my heart, it's the prayers of mamas that have changed the world and will continue to change the world. Thank you. I give you honor, each and every one of you.